During the initial configuration of your SmartZone environment, there are several steps that you should go through or a certain order or process for the configuration of your environment. Best practice, our recommendation is to do a lot of the configuration that has to do with the actual controller. So the SmartZone controller and the cluster configuration should be done up front to get that infrastructure in place and get the settings in the environment secured. Once you've done that, then you will move into additional steps for the actual access point configurations and then your wireless LAN configurations as well. But again, as a best practice, they should be done in this order from top down. This will ensure that your configuration process is efficient and you've got things set up correctly from the get-go. In this demonstration, we'll concentrate on the initial configuration of your SmartZone controller. From our main dashboard, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the settings that are available to us to configure the controller. So under System here, we'll go ahead and click on the arrow to expand the menu selections. Let's start off with the About page that's under General Settings. So the About page gives us a summary of the system information. The information that's shown on here, we've got the controller firmware, access point firmware, the cluster name, the controller serial number, the access point licenses, and system and other licenses that pertain to this particular system. Now let's take a look at the time tab. The system time is set during the system setup. It can be edited later if needed. The system time is crucial to operations like most systems. So the controller should always be able to maintain its time by communicating with the NTP server. Next, we'll select the syslog tab. So syslog offers a means to capture logging data for offline filtering or reporting. A SmartZone device can send logs to a remote logging server by editing these settings. And basically, the standard syslog options can be set with a prioritization for the different events. A detailed examination of syslog is a little beyond the scope of this particular demo, but just know you can configure a syslog server for that logging to be sent. Click on the SCI tab. The Ruckus Smart Cell Insight, or SCI, is a Wi-Fi analytics reporting engine designed for service providers and large enterprises. So just know that this is another product that Ruckus has that helps manage the overall health and performance of the network. And these settings can be configured here as well. So we select the northbound interface tab. The SmartZone device uses the northbound interface portal for third-party applications and connections such as hotspot portals. Users authenticate through the portal, which will need to communicate with the controller. The northbound portal interface allows these server-to-server communications to take place. On the SmartZone high-scale controllers, the northbound interface is set to either the whole system or per partner portal. On the Essentials controllers, there's only a single option to set the northbound interface. So click on the SNMP Agent tab. So SNMP agents are installed on the SmartZone controllers, and when enabled, will send traps to the SNMP server management console. We support both V2 and V3 protocols. If security is a concern, SNMP V3 is recommended due to its added support for authenticated and encrypted communications. Go ahead and select on the SMTP server tab. The SMTP server settings allow the controller to be configured with an email account for the SmartZone server to use to send emails via the SMTP host. The emails can be used for sending system reports and guest passes. Guest passes are used to provide access to guest WLANs. This from email address is used for both event notification and guest pass delivery. So care should be taken to select the email address that is suitable for both functions. Next, we have the FTP configuration. Use an FTP server for the storage of a backup library is highly recommended. The configuration options allow for both FTP and secure FTP. The system backups can be scheduled to run on an FTP server. So using FTP for backups is a standard best practice. It should put this into operation very early in the controller deployment. On SmartZone high-scale controllers, FTP servers can be created for use by the whole system or per partner portal. On SmartZone Essential controllers, there's only a single option to set FTP servers. Lastly, we have the SMS tab. So the SmartZone device uses the external SMS gateway to deliver guest passes. When this is configured, the system presents the guest pass administrator with the option to deliver a new guest pass via SMS. An account with an SMS gateway provider is required before enabling this feature. So under code 3.6, the only supported vendor right now is Twilio. So for more details, refer to www.twilio.com. On SmartZone high-scale controllers, the SMS server can be created for use by the whole system or per partner portal. On the SmartZone Essentials controllers, there's only a single option to set the SMS server. So let's go ahead and move over to the AP settings now. From the AP settings menu, you see that we have several tabs. We have AP registration, critical AP tagging, tunnel UDP port, country code, and the AP number allocation. So each of these we'll just go quickly through here and kind of just give you an idea. Again, it's kind of hard to demonstrate some of these features without having a robust infrastructure. So the first one here, AP registration. What this is going to do is it's going to go ahead and allow us to set up registration rules so that if I don't want an AP to sit in the staging zone, what I can do is go ahead up and set up certain rules so that if a particular access point meets the criteria of the rule, then it will go ahead and place that AP into a particular zone. So you have here, you see you got a rule description, just a friendly name. The zone name, the ones you probably use the most are the AP address range and the subnet. And I can go ahead and put in IP addresses or subnets to be used. And so if that AP comes up when it communicates with the controller originally, and it meets that criteria, it'll go ahead and put this particular AP into the zone that we're specifying. So the only thing to kind of a catch that you need to think about is that if you've got APs in several different locations, just think about overlapping NATed addresses. So if it's a private address, there might be times when there's different environments that have overlapping IP ranges. So you just have to think about that carefully as you're creating the rule. Let's go ahead and select the critical AP tagging tab. If we go ahead and enable this, it's disabled by default. What this is going to do is go ahead and set up a threshold for the access point, or basically identify access points that are exceeding a daily traffic threshold. So this would be the sum of both the upstream and downstream data passing through that access point. Once it's enabled, you can go ahead and edit the threshold to a desired value. And what will end up happening is those APs that pass that threshold will be identified, and you'll actually receive events as well for those thresholds being reached. So the tunnel UDP port, this is the port specified for your GRE plus UDP type tunnels. Basically, and what it also handles is traffic or communications with the virtual SmartZone data plane instances as well. So the default port is 23233, though you can change this here, and this is where you would do that configuration. You also need to configure firewalls to permit tunnel connections and permit this particular port. If you select on the country code, different countries have different regulations on the usage of radio channels, so this does have a technical significance that when you're putting in a country code, when you're trying to configure the radio channels that are going to be used, it will be different based on the country code that you're configuring here in the country code tab. So to ensure that this zone is using an authorized radio channel, Go ahead and select the country code for your location. You should also note that different country codes can be specified for different zones as they're created. So the last tab here we have is the AP number allocation. Go ahead and you can have this selected. And what this allows you to do is actually limit the amount of APs that are allowed by a specific partner managed domain or a zone. So an MSP may have multiple customers, each with their own zone and a number of access points. This feature, basically what's happening is it ensures that their customers do not oversubscribe the licenses that they are entitled to. MVNO domains don't have this option, but when an AP joins a zone where an AP number limitation has been applied to that zone, the controller is going to go ahead and check the current capacity based on the zone's limitation, and it's going to allow the new AP joining if the number of APs connected do not exceed that threshold, or deny the new AP joining if there is no capacity in the domain or zone left based on these limitations. So again, the different tabs that we have here in the AP settings basically are global settings that can be used to configure the APs that are connected to this particular controller. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is go ahead and select on the cluster tab or the cluster menu on the left-hand side now. And what you'll see is we have our cluster that was configured originally. Again, very simplistic demonstration here, but I've got a virtual SmartZone high scale. This is this particular controller. It's part of this cluster. So a cluster for SmartZone can either be between 1 and 4 nodes. It does depend on the scalability and the resources that you've allocated for, let's say, for virtual machines or for the physical appliances. Go ahead and check out that Get Started guide that we have available on the support website for ruckuswireless.com. But so you do need to check the scalability limits there. What this screen is going to go ahead and show us is some of the information and allow us to configure certain things for the cluster itself. So if I see here, the cluster node that I have here is the bottom object, the virtual SmartZone H1-C. And this is the control plane, the representing the control plane for this particular controller. So you see the status is online. We've got the management IP, the cluster IP, and the control IP. Again, for this very simplistic implementation, so instead of doing 3 different interfaces, we're using 1. So if there was, if you were using different networks or different interfaces for these different parts, you would go ahead and configure that. So if I go ahead and select on the configure button here, I'm throwing up this screenshot of what it would look like if you had the 3 different interfaces to configure. But again, for our implementation, it was just 1 interface. So I'll go ahead and show that now. So from here, I can go ahead and change any IP information if necessary. You've got the IP address that's being used for the control cluster and management interfaces. I've got a static that's applied. It's got the gateway, things like that. Also the DNS server that's used for the system. You can also apply static routes. So basically, if you're needing certain networks to be able to get to, and you need to be able to provide static routes to be able to get to that network, this is where you would actually do that. So there are other topics when it comes to the clustering that we will tackle with another video. Again, the purpose of this video is really just the initial configuration and some of the things that should be set up and configured at the initial deployment. But things like cluster failover and having multiple nodes and multiple clusters, we'll talk about some of that in a separate video. So let's go ahead and click on the templates menu on the left-hand side. So on the templates tab, what this enables you to do is 2 different things: zone and WLAN templates. And what this can do is actually just kind of speed up the process of your initial configuration, especially if you have a lot of zones or WLANs to create. What you can do is, like if I click on create here, I've got specific settings that are kind of the base settings, if you will. I can go ahead and put in a friendly name for the zone, And it's pretty intuitive. Basically, what you're doing is creating a template that can be used for the creation of additional zones when you're actually implementing that. So, all the base settings you have, or you're able to go ahead and specify those in this particular template, and then you can go ahead and click OK. And then when you're getting into the actual zone creation, which we'll discuss in another another video, you'll have these base things already configured for that, so it makes creating a zone fairly simple, especially when you're creating a lot of the same type of settings that are going to be available for those particular zones. So I'm going to cancel out of that. And same thing with the WLAN templates. If I go in, I click on create, there's information that I can specify to create a WLAN template as well. So that pretty much wraps it up for this particular video. Again, we're just trying to give you the initial configuration of going in and configuring the system prior to going and configuring access points or your WLANs. There's some system settings. So again, a lot of these are administrative, talking to syslog servers and SMP servers and SMS and that type of thing. And then also having a couple things that's set up prior to going in and configuring a lot of these different aspects of the environment. Look for us to have additional videos that will go into more detail on some of this configuration.